Governor Stitt, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. It's good to be with everybody.
Yeah, so, wanted to start, the Trump administration obviously been very active and aggressive in the energy and mineral space. I'm wondering, when you look at the policies that have come out so far as a whole, how do you see those sort of, helping or hurting in certain cases your efforts to really make Oklahoma this trifecta of, oil and gas dominance, renewable dominance, and minerals?
Yeah. Well, first off, I love what Trump's doing. It feels like he's bringing some common sense back to, everything from permitting reform to energy dominance. And, by putting Doug Burgum, who was a former governor of North Dakota and kind of becoming the energy czar over NEDC, to kind of bring all these regulatory bodies together to kind of focus on removing barriers just to meet the needs of Americans. And I think that's what most Americans want, is to make sure that they have a reliable, affordable energy grid, right? In Oklahoma, I love bragging on our state. We're number 6 in oil production, number 5 in natural gas. But what blows a lot of people away about Oklahoma, we're also number 2 in wind energy, electricity generated from renewables. And so it's unbelievable. We just believe in all of the above approach, or a best of the above. We're not really into all the incentives, but if you just let American companies meet the needs of Americans, it's going to take care of itself. It's good for our allies and our friends. So I think all of his policies are really focused on unleashing that and removing some of the Biden-era policies that we're doing, the LNG pauses, which hurt our allies in Asia and Europe, and then unleashing some of the drilling in in some of the federal lands, which I think is important. My friend, the governor of Alaska, I think this is an important stat. He was telling me, he said, Governor, in Alaska, during the Biden administration, there were more sanctions on my state than the U.S. had on Iran. And so that doesn't make sense for most Americans, and I think this common sense approach back to just letting the free market work, I think is the right approach, and I applaud President Trump and his efforts to put the people in place that think this way about a pro-business, getting government out of the way approach.
Mm-hmm. On a more recent action, the executive order to really enhance critical minerals production domestically, I'm wondering, we just heard from one of the companies. I know Oklahoma has a few processing facilities that are in process, so to speak. Some have just come online, some are close to coming online. How do you view this order impacting, your efforts to really build up Oklahoma as this processing hub for critical minerals?
Yeah, well, first off, we know when you think about, electric vehicles and the push, for new forms of energy, we have to have more batteries. So that means we need more critical minerals. And then you think about magnets that go into cell phones, to our fighters. And a lot of that strategic supply chain has historically been in China. And the effort to bring that closer to home, I think, is really important. It probably started in the first Trump administration, and then President Biden carried that on, and now it's really going to take off. I think that's really important. 2 years ago, I did an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal talking about the need for a strategic stockpile of critical minerals. We do that with oil, and it's important that we do it we think about that and think about the relationships we have around the world to develop those strategic stockpiles. So in Oklahoma, a couple companies that come to mind. USA Rare Earth, just located in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It's the first ever mineral to magnet manufacturer. And they moved to Oklahoma because it's a new process, and they know that we have the most business-friendly state, and you can get that through our regulatory body very, very easy. We appreciate it when capital comes to our state, and so we think it's the best state to set that up. So then we started attracting more companies. Blue Whale, who's recycling and they're creating the black mass. And then we've got, you just heard from Westwind CEO that was here. She's moving to Oklahoma. Green Lion, Stardust, producing nickel. So we just think if we create this cluster early, more of that manufacturing will have more of the workforce, more of the technology, So even our universities are focused on this industry, and I think I've tried to set that stage that we want Oklahoma to be a leader here, and we're trying to move where the puck is heading, and so we think critical minerals is just a key point of that, and it's nice to have the support of the president to say how critical this is for the national security of our country.
On the critical mineral reserve, just because you mention it, we've heard ideas like that kicking around in Congress. Is that an area you think Congress should act on a bipartisan basis this year? I know minerals broadly is like a topic that has bipartisan interest.
Yeah, I mean, I do. When you think about how do you execute on that, you can totally let the free market work, or maybe there's a sovereign fund in the U.S., like a lot of other countries have, that can start developing some relationships strategically with certain countries. Because if we sit back, maybe our adversaries may be setting up those relationships with certain countries for some of the minerals. We just need to be thinking long term, and I think there's some smart people in Washington that need to consider how do you execute on that? How do you make sure that we develop those relationships? We can't be all things to all countries, and we can talk about that, but we certainly need to be strategic with how we develop relationships around the world.
On permitting, a topic I know you talk a lot about, you mentioned, you're close with Interior Secretary Burgum, who also was governor of North Dakota, close by, also leads this Energy Dominance Council. I mean, in your conversations with him, what's your sense of what they can do at an executive level to really streamline, to speed things along, on these mining projects or across the supply chain for minerals?
Yeah, first off, I think Burgum was the right guy to be picked for Secretary of Interior. Just super smart business person, so fantastic business person, and then becomes governor and was just really a leader among us governors. So I think he's a fantastic pick for that position. When I think about some of these permitting reforms and why this is so important. So, for example, Alan Armstrong, who's the CEO of Williams, it's a large Fortune 500 pipeline company located in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Alan was telling me that it cost his company, think about this, twice as much money, twice as much to get the permits as it does to actually build the pipeline. Think about that for a second. It's just, most Americans would say this is absolutely just nuts. It's crazy. So we need to fix a lot of that permitting process. I think he's going to do that. And because we have an all-of-the-above approach in Oklahoma, our energy cost is like the most affordable in the entire country. For example, our consumer is going to pay a third of what they pay in California for electricity for your home. And so that quality of life that is just such an advantage for our state over some others. And that's why you see companies moving to states like Oklahoma and Texas and Tennessee and some of the states that have just an all-of-the-above approach and try to get government out of the way to meet the needs of our citizens. And then when you think about the other side of that, when you think about if you're going to pick on some of these states that haven't been developing their electricity generation, they're going to have brownouts, and they're having some grid problems, especially when you have peak loads that are happening. With Oklahoma has a bunch of everything. Then when one thing goes down, we can subsidize it with others.
And on permitting, just turning to Congress, I know you've written before and talked about NEPA and judicial review, sort of the kind of reforms you think would be important to advance all types of projects. I mean, do you think Congress should sort of return to the table? I know they tried last year on this sort of comprehensive package that dealt with transmission as well. I mean, I'm sure you understand the importance of that given the imperative of meeting growing power demand and AI and data centers. I mean, do you think Congress should come back to the table on a bipartisan basis, and what would you want to see done there?
Well, 100%, and it's got to be it's got to be source neutral, right? And you mentioned that. There's some folks that only want to do permitting reform if it's for green power, right, or green projects. It's got to be source neutral, number one. The governors are working on that. As a member of the National Governors Association, the bipartisan group, I'm working on a working group with my fellow Democratic governors, and there is a bipartisan move right now. We're all talking about permitting reform. Because listen, whether you're the governor of Pennsylvania or the governor of Oklahoma or the governor of Connecticut, you want clean, affordable power for your citizens, right? Because that's an economic driver. The companies look to move to your company, to your state, and they're looking at workforce. What are the power? What are the grid availability? AI, data centers, quantum computing, all the things that are coming in. The money that's flowing in right now. You saw Trump announce a $20 billion project, right? Or $20 billion coming in to these states. He mentioned Oklahoma. So there is an absolute move, bipartisan, to fix these issues. We know as governors that we're going to have to build projects quicker. It's going to take the U.S. right now about 6 to 7 years longer than that does in China, that it does in Europe. So we got to fix that. When you think about permitting reform, a couple things come to mind. Efficiency. It's got to be efficient, right? We've got to get these projects done. We got to know with certainty how we're going to get them across the finish line if you're going to be outlaying these resources. So efficiency, certainty, judicial review. Okay, so let's say a pipeline company or any kind of transmission group, or they're going through and they go through all the permitting process. Well, then they end up, going through that headache. Well, then they get sued by an activist. So now you're fighting a legal battle that just goes on and on because they're questioning what the regulatory body did, and then you settle that, and then you end up getting sued by another party, and it's just all politics, right? Yeah. This is a great story, great example. Everybody's heard of the Keystone XL pipeline that got canceled, right? Well, that would have come to Oklahoma, Cushing, Oklahoma. Cushing, Oklahoma has the largest oil reserve in the country. It's 100 million barrels. Did you know there's already, that's where West Texas crude actually is priced, from Cushing, Oklahoma. WTI is priced from Cushing. And there's already 2 pipelines from Canada to Cushing, Oklahoma. One is already named the Keystone. The Keystone XL was going to be the 3rd pipeline. Right. So who gets involved? There's always money and politics, and maybe the trucking companies that want to move oil that way, or maybe the train companies. So it just gets super, super frustrating for us. But judicial review, we need to get done. The last thing is 401 of the Clean Water Act. So states have the right to have an opinion on a project coming across our state. But what happens is states have been weaponizing that, and so they've been delaying projects. And so, for example, to pick on some of my colleagues in the Northeast, previous governors have delayed projects cutting across their state that would have bring affordable power to the rest of the Northeast. Mm-hmm. That's a problem when you have one state not only keeping my asset from getting there, but somebody on the other end wants it, and now you're having a state holds that up, just weaponizing that. That's a problem. We got to fix it.
Just turning to trade, we're on a Liberation Day Eve here. The president is expected to announce, something tomorrow. We'll see what it looks like, but clearly, tariffs are something he likes to use. He's already done it on the auto industry, steel and aluminum, Canadian crude oil. Yeah, as a leader of a state that's trying to attract a lot of business, how is the business community sort of receiving all this? How concerned are you about, raising costs and that kind of thing for consumers as well?
Listen, it depends on which side you want me to argue on that. But I think as a general rule, the president is trying to bring more jobs and more manufacturing back to the U.S. Yeah. And he feels like that we've been getting ripped off and been subsidizing some other countries. And so it's working. People are coming back. Oklahoma, we're just fixing to land a huge, factory manufacturing in Oklahoma because of some of these tariffs, right? So this is helping in certain instances. There's going to be some unintended consequences, but I think ultimately the president is using it as a tool and a negotiating tool. And then if companies are moving here, I think he can give some exemptions to certain countries. If we have a trade surplus, I think he can kind of strategically do that if we're not getting picked off. But ultimately, if we're going to manufacture vehicles in the U.S. and ship and sell them to our friends in Europe, we shouldn't be paying a VAT tax or a 30% kind of tariff and then only charge them 2.5%. So I think I think it's a fairness issue, and you're seeing manufacturing come back because of his tactics, and we'll figure it out from a state level.
And I can't let you go without talking about a topic we talk about a lot, the Inflation Reduction Act and its future. Just, I mean, yeah, another piece that's obviously brought manufacturing to the U.S. are these clean energy and manufacturing tax credits in the IRA. We just heard Westwind, was talking about the importance of maintaining 45X, the manufacturing credit. I mean, are there specific credits you'd like to see kept in place as Republicans debate potentially repeal or cutting back on some of these in reconciliation? I mean, and how are you engaging on that?
Yeah, I think first off, Republican and Democrat governors from a National Governor Association, we've signed a letter in support of a deal is a deal, right? If there's been commitments made as a businessman, I'd never ran for office before I ran for governor and came from the business world. If somebody's invested capital and they have done that on, businesses need certainty and we have made a deal with them, then I don't think we should change that. Okay, so that's the first thing I would say. A deal is a deal, and now if you want to change it going forward, I think we should look at some of these tax credits going forward. 100%, we can do that going forward. But a deal is a deal. If it's made, and we've already made commitments. We need to stick with those as people invested in our different states. Now, on the national debt, Congress has a tough job, right? There's a lot of worthy projects and worthy things to do, but we cannot keep spending $2 trillion over our revenue. And right now the revenue is $5 trillion. We're spending $7 trillion. If you just go back 5 years, okay, and if we would freeze expenses, we would be grown out of this. We'd have a balanced budget, okay, or really close to it. So I applaud President Trump and Elon for what they're doing, and they're trying to look for efficiencies. And then let's just freeze expense side, and then we'll grow out of this. We don't have to make draconian cuts or anything like that. We can freeze expenses, we can grow out of it. Because right now we're spending $1 trillion on interest only. This isn't principal and interest like your mortgage, right? This is interest only, meaning we're never paying off the debt right now. And then we keep making it worse by throwing $2 trillion on top of it. It seems like every single year. So we've got to get there, but a deal is a deal. It was made in the last administration. We've got to stick with that, and then we've got to move forward and maybe change it going forward.
Mm-hmm. And would you say 45X, the manufacturing credit, is one that you'd like to see kept in place?
If they've already made those commitments, yes. If the new person's coming along, maybe not. I think Congress can decide on if that's something that they want to do. But if it's already been committed, we've got to stick with that.
Cool. Governor Stitt, appreciate your time. Unless there's anything else you want to add.
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.